Hey, everybody. Welcome to OK Every Day, a podcast about TA where we continue diving into how to make our lives okay every day. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Ollie,
Everybody, today we're talking about
the stroking profile.
the stroking profile,
Mm.
whatever that means, Jason.
Actually, we get extended. Jim McKenna's the stroking profile because it was Jim McKenna who created it back in 1974.
Wow. Wow. So
Exciting.
it's over 50 years now.
And it's still used extensively in organizations, certainly in therapy rooms, in groups. So he did a great job, and it's still live and kicking.
That's beautiful. So for people who don't know what a stroke profile is, or a stroking profile rather,
Mm.
and this is something we talked about right smack on before the beginning of the episode. What is a stroking profile?
Yeah, it's funny. I usually call it a stroke profile because it's easier to say, but
Fair
Jim's
enough.
Jim named it stroking profile because I think it's a verb. If you think
Hmm.
about stroking, which we are doing all the time, giving strokes.
Right.
So the stroking profile that Jim created, which he created because he observed things happening in a group situation. I
Right.
think at the time he was talking about group therapy, and he'd noticed how people within the group were stroking each other and responding to each other kind of in an unconscious way. So when somebody wanted a stroke in a particular way, they usually got it. So he created
Hmm.
this profile as a kind of a conscious way to see what's going on. So the stroking profile it's unique to everybody. So it's
Right.
when you fill it out, it is your way of consciously thinking about how you give, receive, or withhold recognition.
Right.
As you and I know, Ollie, we've covered a lot in recognition over the last number of episodes, but it's a huge
Yes.
part of transaction analysis is becoming more aware of our own ways of giving, receiving, withholding, or even turning recognition
Mm.
into something like negativity or making it negative rather than kind of accepting it as positive, for example.
Oh yeah, and for these specific reasons, season two is fully all the episodes. This is episode 7 of season 2. Were all devoted to strokes and stroking, right? So this is episode 7 that we're talking about strokes and stroking, which means just how big of a topic it is. And we're talking about stroking from the child, stroking from the parent, from the adult. We talked about the stroke filter and the stroke bank. We talked about the stroke economy last episode. So there's a huge amount of interesting information around stroking and how it could be useful for us in an everyday life.
I have to say that surprises even me, Ollie. I can't believe we're at episode 7.
I still can't
I
believe
hadn't,
we're in season 2.
I hadn't quite kind of copped that until now. But yeah, we've spent this is the seventh episode that we're spending on stroking. And you're right, it's at the heart of transaction analysis, I would
Mm,
say, literally in terms of emotional side, how we give recognition and receive it. And I would say it's a human thing. I mean,
right,
I'd say us humans, um, we crave it. It's one of our
right.
primary hungers, but how conscious are we of it, right? And
Mm.
what Jim McKenna's doing here is making us more conscious of of it, but also how we can change it. That's the exciting part too.
What also makes a lot of sense is that recognition, I feel, is at the core of the I'm okay, you're okay philosophy,
Nice.
right? So it's the way you make I'm okay, you're okay real is by recognizing something that's happening, be it verbally, non-verbally, conditionally, unconditionally, whatever. So it's kind of it's recognizing that and making that alive, if that makes sense.
Absolutely spot on. I'm totally agree with you there. It is what makes I'm okay, you're okay work
Right.
is stroking, right? So recognizing
Exactly.
somebody else's okayness, recognizing our own okayness. When we do that, we're actually stroking. Yeah, that's the
Yes.
beauty about it. So I think you're spot on.
One thing I wanted to say about today's episode, especially for those who are listening to this on Spotify, is that this will be a fairly visual episode. So we would suggest to go to YouTube to see how we're going to be putting the stroking profile into life. So we're going to visualize it, and based on my example of the stroke of filling in the stroking profile, so that you understand how you can use it for yourself in everyday lives. And one more thing is that we'll add the stroking profile link in the descriptions so that you would be able to access it at any time and use it for your own benefit.
And for listeners, do please come on and listen to this, or sorry, watch this episode 7, because you'll get to see Ollie without his mohawk. Up until this time, he's had a mohawk, and he surprised me today. And I said, Ollie, you should have worn me my heart.
That
But
is
he's
true.
your mohawk
Imagine
has
the
left
people
you.
who imagine the people who the second season they hadn't even had a clue that I had a mohawk, and now they have a clue that I don't have a mohawk
There you
anymore.
go.
There you go.
This is life. Change as we know it.
Yes, but the mohawk did mention, said, you know what, Ollie, I want other parts of your head to experience hair. So now that's exactly what I'm doing. And it's been at close to 3 years that I've had a mohawk, which is
My goodness.
it's a long time.
It's an old mohawk. It's left home. It's graduated
It's graduated, yes. It's nearly a bachelor
in mohawk years.
in Mohawkianism.
Back
Uh,
to stroking profile.
so out of the free child, back into the
Yeah,
kind
that's
of
it.
adultish, and back to the stroking profile. So where do we start when we talk about stroking profile, and especially considering that it's 50 years old? It's over than 50 years, so it's been around for a while.
Yeah, yeah. I think probably the best, even for the listeners and viewers, is that we probably go through each column. So in the
Perfect.
stroking profile, there's 4 columns.
Hmm.
Actually, technically is 8, because there's 4 above and 4
Right.
below. And the way it's kind of structured, the way Jim structured it, is the positive strokes are above the line, and the negative
Hmm.
strokes are below the line. And often this is kind of where you might hear that phrase, below the line. So I think
Right.
Jim did that intentionally to show, like, when stuff's below the line, it's usually negative.
Hmm.
So I think probably best, Ollie, if you start to kind of call out the different bits, and I'll
Right.
explain what Jim's aiming for there, both above the line and below the line.
Right. Well, you know what? This is great because preparing to today's episode, I actually found a stroking profile I completed in, I want to say 2019. I still have not, I have yet to remember what's the year that we met. It's either 2018 or 2019. So it's one of those. And I found my stroking profile from when I did the first course that you did in Google with the Googlers for us, which was really interesting to see how it's also changed throughout the
Mm-hmm.
years. But I'll start with that. And my stroking profile in 2019, we'll start with giving strokes, right?
Mm.
So there's a positive of how often do you give positive strokes to others. And there's, well, I want to say negative, but below the line. I'll use below the line as a less judgmental way of saying things. But
Yeah.
below the line is how often do you give negative strokes to others? So it's all around giving strokes. And what I kind of the way I put it is I usually give positive strokes to others, so very high on that. And I almost never give negative strokes to others, so very low on the bottom line. So what would that tell you as a professional transactional analyst?
Yeah. Well, obviously, you find giving positive strokes much easier than
Yes.
giving negative strokes. That's straight away. And again, I can't, how many gauges are there? Is it 6 or 8? I can't quite remember on the
That's a
stroking
great
profile.
question. So there's in each column, there is one, two, three, four, five, six. There's 6 gauges.
Mhm.
And on giving positive strokes, I've covered five, so very
5. So
high.
you've
Yeah.
you're quite up high. So from a transaction analysis point of view, when we're looking at that, we're thinking about the type of relationships you're in, and where you might be giving these positive strokes. So
Right.
what we say there is you give positive strokes fairly freely, and I would imagine
Mhm.
it's both in work and outside of work. And knowing
Very
you,
true.
Ollie, I know you do that too. So I've been the recipient of your giving of positive strokes. So
You're
you're not
so amazing,
shy.
Jason. Thanks.
I just gave you a positive stroke there, actually. Um, so, you're not shy at giving them, which is great. So they come out plentiful, So that means, you're nice to be around, right?
Hmm.
So, because you can give a compliment, or you can say something nice, or recognize somebody in a nice way. On the bottom side, it
Right.
says that you
The one gauge only,
one gauge
almost
only,
never.
so almost never give negative
Negative
strokes.
strokes.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. So now, what that would mean is, again, you'd be quite lovely to be around because you're heavy on the positive, and you actually hold back the negative. So you'd be a very
Right.
safe person to be around, because you intentionally kind of would censor or stop the negative
Hmm.
strokes, right? Because it's very little.
Right.
Now, Jim McKenna may challenge that. Why so little? So where is the energy going if something's happening and it
Right.
wants to come out as a negative stroke, but it doesn't? It gets kind of censored. Where does that energy
Mm.
go? He would question. He said there's nothing wrong with it. Again, there's no right or wrong in a stroke profile, but it may be that sometimes you may hold back on, say, giving criticism in some way, or kind of.
In your words, Jason, spot on. That's I'm very I feel very comfortable sharing this with the listeners as well, uh with yourself obviously, but with the listeners too, is that the fact that I give a lot of positive strokes is also connected to just trying to be liked. So the
Oh,
likability
yeah,
element, I
yeah,
think
yeah.
there's a bit of that's I think the flip side. I like giving positive strokes to other people because I think it is we don't have enough of them. If we go back to
Agreed.
the stroke economy, is that it's an infinite resource. So there's a
Mm.
lot of things that we could be saying, and I think we probably should be saying more kinder and nicer stuff than we actually do. In terms of the giving negative strokes, that was again the flip side. It was a fear of being disliked, I guess,
Makes sense.
would be one of the reasons why I'd be holding back from giving negative strokes. So I think the way you've interpreted, or the way Mr. McKenna would have interpreted, was spot on.
Yeah, yeah, and I'd be with you, Ollie. I think the world needs more positive strokes. I think we'd all be a lot more better off if we were complimenting each other a lot and being kinder and nicer. So I'm with you. I would always go for score high, there.
Yes.
But I think Jim would be saying just watch out that you're not worrying about being disliked.
Yeah.
So that just conscious thing. That's all I'd say, I think.
Right. Great. So shall we move on to taking strokes?
Yes, well, yes. So, and this is a really interesting one. Like being a psychotherapist, being a coach for many years, I bump up against this a lot, where people really struggle with taking positive strokes. Like they find, oh no, God, I hate when people say something nice about me, or talk about my achievements, and I'm thinking, hello, what? But
Why?
this is why Jim's profile is great, because it shows you like
Yeah.
really clearly, if somebody's struggling in that area, right?
And this is where I was fascinated to see my results of I'm putting 2019 just for the safety of it. But in taking positive strokes, so taking positive strokes, I would have only two gauges,
Right, 2 out of 6, right?
2 out of 6. Yeah. So the way it's defined there, it's seldom. I seldom take
Oh,
or I seldom accept positive strokes. Whereas negative strokes,
mm.
it's 5 out of 6
Yeah.
gauges.
Now, see that, and this is not uncommon, Ali, and that's the watch out, right? That's
Yes.
that's the challenge, So, um, this is what it really brings it to life. So, what that is saying is, um, 2 out of 6. That's not very high. And I'm
Right.
glad, by the way, it's changed. We'll probably talk about that a little bit later on, but it's great that it's changed. But that's pretty low. So when somebody gives a positive stroke, it may not land. It might be kind of ignored, not intentionally. This is all unconscious, but it may not be accepted. It would bounce off the filter. The filter kind of knocks
Right.
it away.
Right.
And as we were saying, there's not enough positive strokes in the world. So it's unfortunate that people can kind of turn away positive strokes, right? But that's kind of what that's saying. It doesn't get through that easy. So a person might have to say it twice, for example, just to get through the filter.
I think that's what you said you do. Usually, a lot of the times you
I
do it.
do.
You'd repeat a compliment twice just to make sure it
Yeah.
landed.
I often say, you may not have heard me. What I said was just to get it through that filter and get it in, because it's good, it's enriching. Now,
Yes.
the other side is the negative strokes. And again, this is so
Mhm.
hard when you see it in black and white, like when you see it written down. So I mean that was 5 out of 6. So what that means is when somebody gives a negative stroke, zoom, it goes straight in,
Mhm.
right? And it may not just go straight in, it may actually be doubled up. So
Right.
it'll probably attach to other ones inside. Like, yeah, I knew that about me. I knew that person didn't, you know what I mean? So and if we look at if for the listeners and viewers in the previous episodes, the stroke bank, all of a sudden
Yes.
now starts to get filled up with negative recognition, both
Mhm.
externally, internally, because it's negatively weighted, unfortunately, and that's developed over time. But of course, the great news is we can change it, right?
True, 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 very true. I think in taking or accepting positive or negative strokes, what changed for me throughout these 6 or 7 years would be perspective. It's always a
Ah,
perspective from another person's perspective. If somebody tells me, oh, you know what, it looks like you've lost weight, and even though I know I haven't, I was like, oh, that's nice to hear. Like, it looks like that. Perfect. That's their perspective of whatever I'm going through. And same goes with negative strokes, is that it's their perspective. And if you might not agree with it, or I might
mm,
not agree with it, I might be able to question it. And it's like, well, so what do you mean by that? Well, what exactly did that mean? Especially if it's kind of, I don't want to say maybe conditional, if there's a
mm,
condition
mm.
tied to it. If it's unconditional, very difficult to question it, because a lot of the time it's just kind of very, very to the core. But I think the perspective element helped me taking in or
Yeah,
accepting positive strokes and not really taking that often the negative strokes, so
yeah,
being more smart about them,
yeah. And this
so
is
to
where
speak.
this is where we protect ourselves, right?
True.
Because the stroke profile can show areas where we're a little bit vulnerable. Like if we're taking in too much negative strokes, we're vulnerable there, right?
Mm,
If we're not accepting enough positive strokes, we're a bit vulnerable there because the positive strokes have to work much harder to get through. So I love what you're talking about there, Ollie, because yeah, so recognizing that when somebody gives a positive stroke, they're being gracious, they're being nice, you know. So
true.
why not be gracious and nice back? Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you saying that, so I can give them a positive stroke. Uh, and the other side, very much so around protecting ourselves. People can say things that just come out of it. They kind of roll out of their mouth. They haven't really thought about, what they're saying. So they can quite easily say something or give negative recognition, um, kind of by mistake. They haven't really fully cooked
Yeah.
the idea, but they just go, Bleh, and all of a sudden it's there. It's out there. So we protect ourselves by not automatically accepting negative strokes,
Right.
right?
True.
Um, Getting, as you say, maybe getting them to explain their thinking or what they're trying to share, because there may be something in what they're trying to share. It's just not being
Mm.
shared very well. So it gives them another chance to kind of get at
Yeah.
it, or they might say, "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to say it like that at all. What I meant to say was
True.
blah blah blah." So
It sounds like that clarification also moves both people into more the adult rather than any
very
other
much so.
position that they're in, right? So it's like, what, like I'm assuming you didn't mean to offend me, but what did you mean by that? It kind of it triggered me the wrong way
Yeah,
because of that word you said, and then oh yeah, I didn't mean that. What I meant was this,
yeah.
and it kind of makes it more clear for both of the people in the transaction, so to speak.
Yeah, particularly in intimate relationships. So this is where a lot of
Right.
the stuff plays out. Is
Mm.
so if with some people we're close to, I don't think you meant to say it. I don't think you're trying to hurt me there. So what were you trying to say? Let's talk. Let's slow down and talk about it. So you're quite right. I think it's inviting people back into the adults. And actually, if you look at Jim McKenna's original article on the stroking profile, he mapped it onto a thing called the egogram,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't think
Mm-hmm.
we've done yet, but we'll definitely put an
No.
episode to the egogram. So he mapped it to say how we give and receive and accept or don't accept recognition shows up in our ego states in particular ways. So what you were saying there is spot on. So it's about that example is getting back into the adult to get us to slow down and think about what we're saying and how we're saying it.
Right. And one thing I wanted to mention while we're still on the accepting part of strokes, it's also very visible in the professional world. And we also touched upon this last episode with the stroke economy, is that sometimes it's discounted in some way, the positive strokes, and the negative strokes are taken as, oh yeah, that's definitely something that I was looking for. So even personally, I'd say I would be looking earlier on, I would be looking more for the negative strokes because I
Mm.
believe them to be more true rather than the positive ones. And I'd usually discount the positive ones, saying, oh yeah, that's because of, my father and mother brought me up that way. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah, but I had something to do with it. So it's good to kind of to accept them and say, yeah, yeah, you know what? Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm thankful and grateful for that stroke, compliment,
yeah. And
recognition.
that's a it's great what you're highlighting there. And a lot of people do this. Like, so if something's nice said, they imagine it's not authentic. Do you know what I mean? So they kind of take the wind out of his eye. Well, he was only saying that because he had to. He's my manager. It's like that's not fair. That's not fair. But of course, the negative is like, oh, that's real. Yeah, yeah. Gosh, I need to listen to the criticism. I need to focus on the criticism. And we did a good job, I think, in the last episode.
True.
Especially in the organization world and corporate world, um, the difference between stroking and feedback. They're not the same thing. They're quite
Mm-hmm.
different. But what we know from Jim McKenna's work is positive stroking is healthy. Do you know what I mean? And there isn't an economy, so we can be gracious. We can be what's known as stroke rich by giving lots of strokes, and the world would be better off if we were stroke rich.
Very true. Very true. And one thing I'll say to the listeners and the viewers is that this episode is most likely will be a bit longer than the usual episode we're going to have because the stroking profile, there's a lot of things to talk into and to dive into just to make it more understandable and how you can use it to your advantage. So I'd actually say if you've listened to us up until now to this episode, start filling in the stroking profile little by little and see where you land. What kind of insights does this share does this give you and to work on, and then what would you like to do with it in the future and the future upcoming weeks, days, months, years?
Yeah, lovely invitation, and you lucky listeners yeah, and viewers, you're going to get us for even longer today. There's a I just gave myself a stroke to just or us actually. It was
Both,
listening
yep.
to us. Yeah, yeah. So it's taken me a long time to get to that level where I can quite freely give a positive stroke to
But it is a
myself.
lot of intentional, I want to say work, but not necessarily
Agreed.
work. But it does to get to a place where you feel okay by asking for a strokes or giving yourself positive strokes. It is a journey. It's not that easy as it sounds because we're wired in a particular way from childhood. Sometimes it's not the best way to give yourself to give yourself a recognition, especially yourself.
Well, that's right. That's the messages we used to get, right? You know, don't give yourself a positive in case, you offend somebody or, you get a big head or whatever the heck, something bad will happen if you think you're good at something. Um,
Somebody might feel uncomfortable.
yeah, that's right. You're taking away from somebody by giving yourself a positive stroke. I said, okay, well, as kids, of course, we totally believe this. Do you know what I mean? Like we
Yes.
totally take it on. But you're right, Ali. It takes a bit of work to change it, but it can be great fun. Actually, the work
Right.
can be great fun because if you're going around giving loads of positive strokes, it can actually brighten lots of people's days. But certainly, it's worth it. The payoff long term. And of course, my stroke profile changed substantially over the years. To be where it is now, where I love it, where I can play with it, where I'm much more conscious of it, and I can kind of direct things a little bit more. Uh,
Mm,
but of course, we do slip back into unconscious stuff. So sometimes I would slip into, the negative strokes or give myself being a bit harsh, critical on myself or somebody else, right? So it's a
right.
constant work on, but gradually over time, as we'll see with your stroking profile too, it starts to settle in a way that we want it rather than we were told it ought to be.
Yeah, very true. Oh, I love this conversation and where we're going with this because the next two columns in the stroking profile would be asking for strokes and asking for positive strokes and
Mhm.
asking for negative strokes.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, Jason, this is my favorite two columns of the whole stroking profile.
Okay. Why? Why
And
is that?
the reason is because that's where the most change has happened for me
Oh.
over the last 6, 7 years. Uh, because the first time when I was doing the stroking profile in 2006, say 19, when I was reading this, I said like, you can ask for strokes? What? Oh, that was new to me. And that was the concept of asking for something. Well, negative did exist. Asking so I did bad, didn't I? Like that
Yeah.
did exist. But asking for positive strokes was not a concept that I was introduced to at some point because in a certain way I was brought up as like excellence is the only possible outcome. So anything below that is kind of not good. Right. So asking for positive strokes was just not really in the day to day. And for a lot of my peers, that would be the same. So we wouldn't be asking for anything. Oh, so what what great thing do you think I did today? That's not a question that
Yeah.
existed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. What did you like about my presentation? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
exactly. Exactly.
is a lovely question, right?
Right.
But it's not used enough because of this kind of, oh, we can't ask for positives. Really, we just can't. That's seen as a bad thing for some reason.
True.
Like it's often it's often when people mistake the idea of self-care and selfishness.
Oh,
Yeah, they often mistake that. Selfishness is usually when we're taking from somebody. We're being selfish. We're just kind of there's enough to go around, but I'm going to keep it all to myself, right? But self-care is not selfishness, right? So when we're asking for positive strokes, that's self-care. We're not taking from anybody,
wow.
okay? Because positive strokes are free to give, and if the person wants to give one, great. I've just prompted them. I've given them an
Mhm.
offering to give one.
That's a very profound way of looking at it. Giving positive strokes and accepting positive strokes is a way of self-care, not a way
Yeah,
of selfishness. And that's very profound.
yeah, and very important nowadays because we're so busy. We're so busy doing stuff that often our self-care drops. But this
Mm,
stroking can happen anytime in the moment. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to wait to get to the gym to
no,
give, receive, or ask for a positive stroke. We can just do it straight away. I can give one to
true.
myself. I can ask somebody. You know, what do you like about what I'm wearing today? you know, I just think, why not? Let's just see what happens. They'll probably laugh first, which is great. I've now got somebody laughing, and then they might say, "Oh, I actually like the way you did your hair today. Oh, thanks, thanks for that.
Yeah,
You look great too.
the way I did my hair today was surprising for a lot of
But
people.
yeah,
I actually had an interaction over the weekend where somebody pointed, I was wearing a cap, and someone pointed at me saying, "Oh, you're the Mohawk guy." And I was like, "Well, not anymore."
I've changed my profile. I am not the Mohawk guy.
But coming back to the stroking profile, the way I answered for this in 2019 was asking for positive strokes, almost never, only one gauge or
Whoa, one out
one
of
one
six.
block,
Whoa,
1 out of 6, and asking for negative strokes, 2 out of 6. So I did, but it was kind of skewed towards I wanted to hear something negative because I only thought that was true, so that
yeah,
was the real feedback or stroke or whatever
yeah.
that would be, right?
So the good news there is the negative one was not very high, right?
Yeah.
It was only 2 out of 6, but it's twice the positive because the positive was only 1 out of 6. You know what I mean? So unfortunately, it was you know more negatives going in.
Right.
So it's great to hear that you've changed the positive, to kind of
Oh, well, we don't
counterbalance
know
that.
that yet. I
Oh,
haven't
oh,
showed my
oh, sorry,
2020.
am I getting too far ahead?
Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. We're going to keep it intriguing
It's
until
a
the end.
mystery.
As the mystery is here. Yes. So anything else about asking for strokes that we need to cover?
Well, a lot of the bottom bit. So asking for negative strokes, people scratch their head and say, why would I do that? I don't go around asking for negative strokes. Actually, we do. Sometimes we set ourselves up. It's like this idea of setting ourselves up for failure. Sometimes
Right.
we do approach something in a certain way that we're inviting a negative reaction,
Mm,
right? So again, this is not conscious. This is what's being played out. Because
right.
if we're heavy on the negative, that's what we're going to seek out
Okay.
unconsciously to kind of
Right.
feed that side. And again, the stroking profile highlights that. So yes, sometimes we will seek negative strokes, because we're more used to getting them. It's a
Mm.
bit like sour milk. It's still milk, but it's sour. But it needs milk. You know what I mean? So,
Your face said it all.
sorry, yeah, I'm not a big fan of sour milk. So, I'm just get a better analogy. But that's if that's all we're used to. That's what we'll still be craving unconsciously until we
Right,
go. Well,
right.
I'm not going to do that. Like,
Mm,
do I set myself up in conversations where
mm,
it all of a sudden gets critical and dramatic? And did I start that? I might
right.
have actually by my approach, you know?
Well, one thing I can share with yourself and with the listeners and the viewers is that what helped me in getting better at asking for be it positive or negative, because I think it's okay to ask for negative strokes as well in terms of what do you think didn't go well? I
Yep.
facilitate a lot of trainings and I do want to know where I can get better for next time. I just don't necessarily crave for negative feedback just for the heck of it. But what does help is after something happened, is understanding what would you like from that interaction? Do you want to know what went well? Do you want to know what didn't go well? And that kind of helped me understand, okay, you know what? I want to ask how this part of the facilitation or the training went so that I understand what was good about it, what wasn't so good about it, what I can change for next time. And kind of being maybe coming from it from an adult, kind of not taking it as a judgment, but rather, okay, this is a fact of what happened. And if it's true, then we'll see what I can do about it. But not taking it as a, oh, now this means that I'm a bad facilitator or a bad
Mm.
coach or a bad manager or a bad person. So not necessarily that. And that's what
That's
helped me a lot.
and that's a great example because sometimes we can go global, way too big. So
Mhm.
it's like judge me on my whole presentation in 2 words. It's like hang on, that's not fair. I put a lot in. So the
Very good.
so the more specific we can be, the better.
True.
Like, and again, especially around this idea of getting feedback and strokes through the feedback, which is, you know, I might tailor, I won't just go out and, tell me what you think. I might say something like, I think I did this well and did this well and this well. I don't think I did this too well. What do you think about that
Hmm.
bit? So I'm kind of funneling
Narrowing
it
it
in,
down. Hmm.
right? And I'm ready for the negative strokes. One, because I don't think I did well, but I might be being too hard on myself. They might say, I might have said, I don't think I answered that question so well. I don't think it was so specific. So
Hmm.
already I'm being hard on myself. Then they might say, well, I don't, you answered it fine. I think you're being hard on yourself. However, you could have said, da, 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 or you could have expanded this,
True.
da, 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 da. And that's where the learning comes from. So
Mm.
although there's a negative stroke in there, it's acceptable because I've asked for it in a specific way as
Yes.
opposed to a global. When we go global, we leave ourselves vulnerable to
Mm.
whatever somebody's going to say.
True, true. And it's not I'm using the word judgmental a lot, but it's not judgmental the way that you described it in a way of so what do you think of your from your perspective, how did that land or did not land to you when I was explaining it? Oh yeah, it did land. Oh no, it didn't land. Maybe you could tweak this next time to make it more understandable for everyone else. Or maybe it did. And I'm just kind of being a bit in my head a little bit.
Yeah, because a lot of people that they, in particular, presenting, not a lot of people, enjoy presenting, and they often think they come across sounding nervous because they can hear their
Right.
voice going, but mostly people don't hear that.
No.
So we can be kind of uber conscious sometimes when we're presenting that is not what's being put out.
I'm going to be very careful here in terms of not mixing stroking and feedback, but
Yeah.
in because I work in sales, one of the frameworks that we use to provide post call feedback would be two by two. So one thing you did well, one thing you could do differently for next time. And what you said was resonated a lot. A lot of the time, people would say, "Oh, I was very nervous," and the relief on their faces when they hear, "Well, you didn't sound nervous at all." Is kind of, oh, really? Oh my God, that's so cool. Because the confidence, a lot of the time, the confidence comes from the voice, but the nervousness comes from the head,
Mm,
and that plays tricks with you sometimes.
totally does.
Uh,
Totally
but
does.
and giving back the stroke of saying, no, 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 you actually did pretty well. You were very confident, and everything was well, and you can see the relief on their face, like, "Ooh, great."
And the last column, sir, this is the kind of the most challenging column I
I think
find.
this was the toughest one for me, and I
Mm,
think it still is the
Mm.
toughest for me to kind of to grasp around. It's refusing to give positive or negative strokes. They're fairly similar, both bottom line and t top line and bottom line, or over the line and below the line are
Yeah.
similar for me. So it's two gauges above the line. So I seldom refuse to give positive strokes.
So you don't hold back.
Uh,
Yeah.
yes, and it's between two and three for me in refusing to give negative strokes.
So I think Jim would be pretty happy with that. This last
Okay.
column it's a slight kind of psychological twist that can cook people's noodles, but I think he is kind of looking for it to be somewhat similar, top on bottom. So it should match a little bit with your first one. So you you don't you don't hold back on giving positive strokes, right? Is another way of
Mhm.
saying it. So if you look at your first
Yeah.
column, you're good at giving positive strokes, right? So how often do you not give positive strokes? So that would be low.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Uh, so it's saying sometimes you might hold back, which is natural, right?
Which is okay. Yeah.
That's what Jim's going for. Like there are times where we might just hold back for consciously or unconsciously. We just might not feel comfortable, or it's not the right situation, or whatever the heck, right? So
Hmm.
sometimes. Now, if a person scores very high on that, that, which means they're withholding a lot of positive strokes.
Right.
There'd be questions of why are you doing that? Why, it's when you see somebody wants uh, uh, acknowledgement, recognition,
Right.
or some sort of care, but you don't.
Hmm.
What's it doing? What's that kind of? Why are you doing that? So
Hmm.
it's like somebody saying, "I know he wanted a hug, but I'm not going to hug him." You know, it's like, he wanted a shoulder to cry on, but not my shoulder. That kind of way. So it's like, oh, okay, gosh, that's a bit harsh, right?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the example that I think we discussed in one of the previous episodes is that maybe even I mentioned it, but I remember we discussed it. I don't remember who did. Um, is that when I see my partner in a beautiful dress,
Mm,
and instead of saying that, I just kind of withhold it for some unapparent reason. I
yeah,
don't say it, although
yeah,
I think it.
yeah.
But then that might create some kind of not necessarily an issue, but it's like, why didn't you say anything about how I look? I was like, I thought it. I didn't say
Yeah, that's right.
it.
It just didn't come out.
Yeah,
So in that instance, the person's not stroke rich because they're holding it back.
right.
And what's the harm in saying it? And saying you look really lovely today. Can I? And then
And I
oh,
especially I think it's a big thing when when it concerns people who are close to us. I guess that would be that
mm,
creates some kind of tension, does it not? Would that be a fair assessment?
uh, well, I guess all recognition can fall into a bit of tension sometimes in a
Yeah,
long-term relationship because stuff evolves.
right.
And this is where TA helps. With the "I'm okay, you're okay" agreements. Like somebody might say, you look really good in that dress. You look really great. Oh, what do you want? It's like, oh, God. But now, if there's a response like that, it's because something's built up in the relationship, right? But if both people know that actually, we're working on this, let's work on kind of giving each other more credit. Let's be nicer to
Mm,
each other. Let's say nice things. Let's just practice that. And the other person says, that's a good idea. Then there's no kind of hidden agenda. It's like
cool.
this is what we want to do. And long-term relationships go through different phases. So again, the more overt we can be, the easier it is to work with. Which is why if a couple fills out their stroking profile, I mean, how brilliant. Do
Ooh.
you know what I mean? To share together. Hey, look, you're really good at this, and I struggle here, and I'm going to practice some stuff.
I think that
You,
sounds like another invitation for our viewers slash listeners to maybe complete their stroking profiles and see where it gets you
yeah,
with your
yeah.
significant others.
And we haven't the last column. What's the bottom one of the
So
last column?
the last column is where we'd want to go at really. I'd be interested in any examples that might get from there. So it's refusing to give negative strokes.
Right. So that's an interesting one. Again, it's refusing to give negative strokes. So effectively, what Jim's saying is, imagine somebody said something hurtful,
Hmm.
and you just accept it.
Hmm.
You don't say anything back. So you're refusing to interact negatively. And long term,
Mhm.
that's not protective. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes
Right.
we need to say, "Hey, that wasn't nice. I don't like what you said there.
Mm.
I don't like how you're treating me." Right? These are negative strokes, but actually they're important because again, it comes back to a little bit of protection.
Right.
Right? So if I refuse to give a negative stroke, then actually I'm edging on the side of being too nice. And if I'm being
Mm.
too nice, sometimes I can be taken advantage of.
Right.
Does that make sense? So
It
he
does
would
make
say,
sense.
that's why when yours, for example, Ali is a good mix. He would say, you actually need a bit of both. Do you know that kind of way? You need as a human, we need
I
to
would
have
actually
have them in
challenge
there.
my assessment of 2019 of refusing to give negative strokes. I think it was much higher in terms of it was more gauges,
Ah,
to be honest.
right.
So I think I might have that because it's a complex
That
a
last
complex
column, yeah,
question, right? I think I might have the way you explained it, I'd say at that time it was more 4 or 5 gauges, to be
right.
honest
To
with
be
you.
much
So
higher, yeah,
I,
that would
I
make sense.
what made a change for me is when you said to interact in not a negative way. I want to remember the phrase you exactly said, but the not to be afraid of conflict is the
Yeah,
way I hear it
yeah,
in a way, but
yeah,
in a to be ready to present your case in with a negative stroke, saying, you know what, I don't agree with you there.
yeah, yeah. So
I
it's
don't
it's
think that's a right way to say it. Be it something that the person said or being the way the person behaved. But it's unacceptable. It's not. So I think back then I would be more of a in the 4 or 5 range of the
yeah,
blocks there, which also makes sense because it's a flip side to the first
yes, that's right.
2 columns, right? So that would be kind of the flip side of
Yeah, yeah. Which is why I'm dying to find out
it, how it's
what,
changed.
if anything, has changed for
Well,
my friend Ollie.
let us see. Let us see. So, even based on our conversation today, I'll make a few adjustments to the
Mm.
visuals that the people will be seeing in the video. And this is another reminder to the people listening on Spotify. If you're able to visit YouTube and watch this episode there, the visuals of the stroking profile will also be there, so you can reference to them and understand what we're actually talking about versus just listen to us. Uh, Explaining the stroking profile is quite complex. Um,
Yeah, because it's visual, right? It's a real
it is.
visual
It
tool.
is.
So when you're filling it out, you're supposed to actually color in the columns. So it's like a bar chart, and once you see it as a bar chart, you can see quite quickly which way it's weighted above or below the line, just at a
Right.
glance, right? And then you'll be
That's
able to
true.
see which column is heavy or too heavy in one area.
Right. So what's changed for me? In terms of giving positive feedback, nothing, or positive strokes, sorry, nothing has really changed. So I'm really happy with giving positive strokes out to people.
You're
And
still
Jason,
that lovely guy.
I think the lighting you've fixed the lighting for the podcast looks amazing, and you look great in that lighting yourself.
Thank you, sir. Right back at you.
And around giving negative strokes, that has actually increased. I'd say I often, so that's 3 gauges. Between seldom and often, I give negative strokes, but it's also to an extent that I'm comfortable with it. So it's um, not necessarily because I want to, because I just want to feel like a bad guy or something or be negative, but because I feel okay by saying I disagree with something or I feel that something's incorrect. And that is within work, it's within personal life, it's within relationship with my partner. So that's it just feels more comfortable. And I think the phrase that comes to mind, and I'm going to say it a few times when we're talking about the negative strokes in the stroking profile, is I feel okay with them.
Mm,
I feel much more
mm.
okay with them than I felt 6, 7 years ago.
Yeah, and it's much
Uh,
more real, Ollie, right? Like it's
True.
much more real because it was too low
It was almost
back
never.
then.
So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
couldn't. I felt fear giving someone negative
Mm,
feedback
okay.
or negative strokes. Um, so taking or accepting positive strokes, that has increased to 3.5, 4 gauges,
Ooh.
um, which is
Up
great
from what?
because
What was it up
when
from?
from 2.
Two. So
So
more than doubled, I would say.
yeah, about doubled. And I think that's where I feel happy about that because I'm able to say thank you and appreciate the recognition that I've just received. And I think it just makes the interaction much more wholesome and much more intimate, as one of the
Yeah,
goals of TA generally.
yeah.
A similar approach would be to taking negative strokes. It's lessened, so now it's 3 gauges, but it feels again, it's under the lens of I feel okay with it and I use it in terms
Hmm.
of do I agree with this or is it just someone's perception of a situation and I can't really do anything about it? But I'm okay with taking it in. So even if I hear it, I don't go into bashing myself mode saying,
Yeah,
oh, it's
yeah.
like, oh, why did I say that word? No, it happened. Okay, I won't do it again
Great. And
if I
that's
don't want it.
that's dropped a lot. What was it? It was quite high.
So it was 5 and
Yeah,
it's dropped to
okay.
3.
It's dropped to three. So again, it's down 2 gauges. Brilliant work. And
Right.
the positive's gone up 2 gauges.
Yes.
Um, I guess in general, I think what Jim's talking about is make sure the positive always outweighs the negative. You know what I mean? So if they're equal,
Mm-hmm.
then it's, it's still negative tends to have a little bit more kind of tension to them, negative
Okay.
strokes, the kind of way. So I guess, for the listeners too, is, you know, positives are good for us. So they
Right.
do need to outweigh the negatives. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the change there is substantial. There's a big shift.
This is more of a an observation. I don't know if there's a fact to talk to this, but sometimes the weight of negative is much more higher than positive. So the amount of it, if the positives are a bit more, I think it makes a lot of sense of what you're saying.
Mm.
Because that's the way I feel personally. That sometimes when there's a negative stroke, it just feels a little heavier than a positive stroke would, you
Yeah,
know?
it's a bit more hurtful. You see,
Yeah,
it connects with our feelings.
true.
You know.
So when I go to asking for, this is, I think, the biggest change. So
Whoa.
asking for positive strokes went from 1 gauge to 5.
Wow. Look,
So
that's like I climbed a mountain.
and I finally don't feel uncomfortable and I feel okay with asking for something that I think I did well. And to be honest, even asking for a compliment, I don't feel uncomfortable with it. I love it. And I was like, oh, with the Mohawk situation was the funniest one. So what do you think? Did you like my new haircut? And it's really rare that people, one thing that we talked about earlier today, it's really rare that people would say no to giving a
Oh
positive stroke.
yeah.
They would
Oh
actually
yeah.
compliment you a
Absolutely.
lot, especially if you ask for it. So it was again a source of great fun, a source of just a few jokes here and there, but it was all in positive, and there were a lot of positive strokes given. As one person said, "Oh, you have a mole on the back. I never saw that with the mohawk." And he's like, "Amazing, great."
Goodbye, Mohawk. Welcome, Mole.
There you
It's
go.
all just part of ourselves. But I mean,
Um,
it's brilliant there, Ollie, because that's what most people experience is when we unshackle ourselves of this idea
mm,
that we can't. It frees us up. And
true.
like what you said, there's like you love it now,
Hmm.
and I'd be on the same I'd be exactly the same. I love it too. It frees us up to play with it.
Mm.
I think probably as kids, I don't know what we were probably better at it. I think kids are good at giving,
Oh yeah.
oh, you look nice, you know what I mean, to each other, and it gets drummed out of us. So we have this sense of freedom when we get rid of that, and it's lovely to hear, really lovely to hear, my friend.
Right. I've got a guest here, Miroslav. Just give me a second. We're finishing up the episode, and then say again in 10 minutes.
Look at that. I mentioned children, and
And there we go.
a child appears.
That was soon to be 11-year-old appeared in our
Oh,
podcast.
lovely, lovely.
And asking actually, will I have lunch anytime soon? Um, and talking about asking for, so the asking for negative strokes
Mm.
remain the same. So it's 2 gauges. It was 2 gauges. It
Oh, yeah, that
remained
wasn't
the
very
same.
high. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wasn't very high. I think what changed was the intent of asking. So when before, I just didn't even know that you could ask for stuff like that. But um, the intent was to get previously the intent was to get some negative feedback as
Mm-mm.
maybe fuel. I don't know why I needed it, but to reaffirm that something's wrong. Here, it's more for productive purposes. As
Yeah,
in, so
yeah.
what could I change? What could be done differently? Be it in a role as a manager, be in a role
Mhm.
as a father or
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
husband, be in a role as a co-host of a podcast.
Oh,
Oh my
an
God.
important co-host.
So that remained the same, more or less. Refusing to give overall, so in the also kind of remained the same. So refusing to give positive strokes was 2 gauges and
Mhm.
remained there. I'd even question it's between 1 and 2
Yep,
somewhere
yep.
overall. And refusing to give negative strokes changed from 3 to 2.
Yeah,
So
but again, quite
not
balanced. I
not a
think that's what.
huge
Yeah,
change,
yeah.
yes, but again, I think more awareness has come to whenever it is I'm giving negative strokes, why I'm giving them, and what I'm trying or why I'm receiving them, and what I
Mhm,
try
mhm.
to get out of it. So that would be Ole's stroking profile in 2025.
Yeah, some gorgeous changes, and I think Jim McKenna, those last two columns, make a lot of sense because we can't eliminate negative strokes,
Mm.
nor should we try, because we'll just probably get more negative. Oh, we can't get rid of these negative strokes. What am I? Something wrong with me? You know, but it's about knowing they happen, and as you said
Right.
there, Ollie, more awareness and kind of more consciousness,
True.
towards giving, receiving, protecting, so stopping, that kind of stuff. And it
Mm.
actually, I think it makes life first of all, an awful lot more interesting and leads to more happiness more often.
Sounds like it. And believe it or not, Jason, but we've been talking for over 50 minutes
Oh
right
my
now.
God.
This is by far the largest episode that we've had. And one idea I'm having is that we might, cut it into two just because of the length of it.
Yeah.
50 minutes. I mean, the positive stroke there is that we can do a 50-minute podcast.
Oh my God, that went so
And it didn't
fast,
even
my man.
feel like it.
No, goodness gracious.
But for the viewers and listeners, dear viewers, listeners, thank you so much for being here with us for the last 50 minutes of this episode of OK Every Day, where Jason and I talked about the stroking profile of Mr. McKenna, which is actually 50 years old. If you like this video, press the like button, share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're interested in TA content, amazing, you're in the right place because on YouTube, on Spotify, we're uploading new episodes of season 2 of OK Every Day, and it will keep you informed of every OK Everyday episodes coming out soon. In any case, we really hope that you stay okay
Every day.
every day.